So welcome everyone to this kind of lockdown time Zoom session. Thanks for joining us. I read a quote from Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, which grabbed my attention the other day. He was quoted as saying that this pandemic was an opportunity for sport to tear it down and rebuild it. So I don't really know what the context was, but I quite like the spirit of the comment and thought it might make for quite a nice discussion. Now, when I say I like the spirit of the comment, I don't mean to in any way kind of diminish the scale of the current difficulties, but perhaps try and kind of focus on the positive things that might emerge from this crisis. Obviously, the world has changed immensely in the last kind of month or so, but amid all the kind of upheaval and understandable concern, perhaps we can kind of explore some positivity that might come out of this kind of upside down world right now. So to that end, I've brought together three of the most positive folks I know, and I'll introduce them in a second. And I thought we could just kind of quickly go around the room and do some introductions. I'll go first very quickly. My name is Blake, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of 21st Club, which is a business that uses sports intelligence to help clients get ahead and help shape their futures. And I'm joined by Eni Aluko, Rasmus Ankersen, and Simon Wilson. And if people are watching this in gallery view, I'll maybe go in that direction. So maybe Raz, if you could just introduce yourself quickly to start off with.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Blake. Pleasure to be on the call. My name is Rasmus, and I was lucky to be the co-founder of 21st Club with Blake quite 7 years ago now. Today, I spent most of my time helped run two football clubs, Brentford in West London and Midtjylland, my childhood club in the Western Denmark. And we got both clubs have the same owner, which is Matt Benham. Other than that, I have written a few books on talent development and high performance cultures. I think that's a quick summary.
Thanks, Raz. Hi, Eni.
Hi guys, thanks for bringing me in on the call too. So I'm Eni Aluko, ex-professional footballer for Chelsea England national team and Juventus, as well as Birmingham and other clubs I've played for. I'm the newly appointed sporting director for Aston Villa Women's team, and a bit of a rookie sporting director, so very open to lots of expertise and creative ideas of how to really push the women's game forward. So excited for the role, excited for the opportunities ahead.
Thanks, Eni. And last but not least, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see everyone again. So Simon Wilson, currently Director of Football at Stockport County in the National League. Recently started with Stockport after a period of doing some independent consulting, some time with 21st as well, time in the Premier League and others. And prior to that, I was 10 years with City Football Group / Manchester City on their various escapades, trying to create a winning team and a global football group. I think we're living in, this is an unprecedented time in terms of the scale of what's going on, but football has seen some challenges along the way. It just feels like we're getting all of them at the same time at the moment. But as you said, Blake, it will stimulate some new behaviours, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see what sort of comes the other side of it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Obviously, you all come from different backgrounds, but I think knowing you pretty well, what connects you, aside from similar job titles, is really your kind of growth mindset and the appetite to kind of constantly try and move the needle and make progress within your clubs. So in that sense, I think we're kind of pretty aligned on the call, which is cool. And just to get the juices flowing, so I want to kind of dig into the theme, but I think, you know, for the folks watching in, I just wanted to start by maybe going around the room again and just seeing, you know, how you've kind of been affected by the lockdown. Really, could be anything at all. A little kind of story, a little anecdote that you wanted to share, and maybe I'll keep the same order for now. Perhaps I'll come to you first, Raz. You're in Denmark right now, right?
Yeah, I'm in Denmark right now, spending some time here at the office with the Midtjylland, the Midtjylland guys. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's it's a time with a huge amount of uncertainty from a business perspective. We had pretty much every one of our significant revenue streams frozen. Match day income, TV broadcasting deals, lots of uncertainty about that. And then obviously the transfer window, no one really knows when it's going to start or when it's going to end, and how this situation is going to impact that. So in a situation like that, I think, you know, every responsible management team needs to look at the oxygen of any business, which is cash, and see how can you get through this this time with all the uncertainty, you know, from a cash perspective, and keep the business alive. Football is a really volatile business model in its nature. So there's already a huge amount of risk involved, and now you have something which is completely outside your control, which you know, makes it even more risky. So I've spent a lot of time the last few weeks looking through cash flow budgets and speaking with my colleagues about how we can almost kind of get into a sleep mode, where we don't burn that much cash until we know when are we going to play again and under which conditions are we going to play. But then obviously, I mean, we used to say that constraints breeds creativity, and a lot of new ideas can come out of a situation like this. I mean, we had a lot of conversations in the last few days here at Midtjylland with the executives, where we were discussing everything from business models to crazy ideas. And I think actually we will probably look back at this time in a year or something and think, all right, that idea actually came out of the Corona crisis. To be specific, we had this one idea which we are now implemented, and which have kind of, I would almost say, the idea has spread like a virus around the globe, which is the first drive-in football experience ever. So I don't know if you can see this, but I wanted to just quickly show. I'm at the office here at Midtjylland, but we have a big asset here, which is that we have the most parking spaces of every club, I think, in the world, just outside our stadium, because there's an exhibition center next door. And we thought, how can we turn that into an advantage in this situation? So we came up with this project, which is called Drive-In Football, the first drive-in football experience in football. So people will come in here, and there will be big screens on each side of the stadium, and we expect to have maybe 4,000 to 6,000 cars here, all dressed up. Obviously, you know, you have to dress up your car to get access, and hopefully we can create an amazing experience. So that's an idea we have, something we're going to execute on. There's a lot of detail and operational challenges that goes into that, as you can imagine. But hopefully that will be an example of that a difficult situation can also lead to innovation. Nice.
No, thanks for sharing that, Raz, and we'll come on to a bit more of that stuff later. But any other than playing chess with your sister online, and last time I checked in with you, I think you'd lost a deciding set, and you were pretty devastated about that. How have you been spending your time?
I've been joking actually. So the first month of my sporting director role at Villa was March. And literally, as soon as I started, the coronavirus pandemic started. So, I've been joking that, my UEFA Masters that I did sort of as to learn how to become a sporting director, it definitely didn't have a coronavirus module. So it's kind of been, it's been an absolute baptism of fire, deep end. I've had to sort of swim in the deep end from the get-go. And in a way, it's been really exciting because that's what you want. You sort of want, on the job, that sharp mind that you need in the job to really sort of provide solutions to really quite unprecedented problems. So I think for me, it's been in a weird way really, really beneficial just to get into the job straight away and just kind of have to figure it out. And I think one of the sort of mindsets that I've really tried to just kind of train myself and for the wider group and for the technical team is to sort of focus on the now and focus on, like, what are we certain about now? It's a very uncertain time, and we can't necessarily get into, as much as it's important to plan ahead for sort of different eventualities, it's very important to sort of focus on what's going on now. So, the team are top of the league, 6 points clear, 6 games left. We only need to win 4 games to get promoted. So all of our planning has been to continue that way, to continue as if we are hopefully going to get promoted into the Women's Super League, which is the equivalent of the Premier League in the women's game. I think anything other than that becomes a bit of a distraction, becomes a bit of a sort of uncontrollable, it becomes a negative. Obviously there's lots of discussion around, is football going to come back? Is it going to continue? But I think what's really kind of driven us as a team is focusing on, right, we know football's not cancelled yet, so we can continue to focus on football still potentially coming back, us being in a good position, continuing to recruit. So recruitment's been really exciting. And then I've built in some sort of contingent stuff in terms of contracts. So where there's that uncertainty in terms of, is the league going to come back or not, we'd have to go back to the drawing board if that happens. So it's really just being able to, from a mindset perspective, control what's happening now and try and not touch the uncertainty part of it as much as possible.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Eni. Si?
In regards to, life, I mean, you can relate so much to what the guys are saying, and I think that, I think there will be stages of this that you go through. The first stage being trying to get secure, and as Rasmus said, sort of just trying to understand, okay, how do we bolt everything down here, and how do we get ourselves in a safe position? In our situation, we have an owner that is in an okay position and just sold some assets, and off the back of that is moved forward with his acquisition of Stockport County. And we're also in a situation where we were transitioning from a part-time model into a full-time model with contracts that potentially lower than other clubs had and that were due to drop off this summer. So it gives quite an agile, flexible position. But you've got loads of things going on inside of that. Firstly, we know that the wider context in the level of football that we're at right now is that that's not the norm. And there's some very threatening situations around that people are facing. And we are, as the rest of the clubs are at their various stages, we're involved in debates into, for the wider good of the league or the game, in this moment in time, and how to move forward. So we're very conscious of our role in the wider picture. And you've also just got a duty of care to your own athletes, in terms of they've got mortgages, kids, various dependents on them. And, we can't just do the leanest possible route to get secure as much cash as possible in the shortest amount of time, because you've also got to recognise that you're also cutting off the oxygen, as Rasmus said, for many people there. So I think I can relate totally to what Eni was saying. There is no module for this. I don't think if you've been in the job in many years, you haven't really covered a pandemic as part of one of the things you need to do. And we are all sort of learning on the job and as we go. But I personally, I've been extremely busy having to work with the rest of the management team in scenario planning and in terms of through budgets, but also sort of ethically, where do we stand on that? What do we think? What's the right? Has anyone got an experience of this? That type of thing. So it's been really intense. And what that's driven from a lockdown perspective is that I've just been, slowly eating more and more and drinking more and more. And, when the stocks have started to run out, I've been sneakily, and most parents will relate to this, sort of sneakily sort of diving into the kids' chocolate drawer and just like one by one sort of taking it without, hopefully, because they tend to be sort of bite-sized. So you don't notice when the stock's going lower, but, obviously I've sort of just recently been rumbled that the majority of it's is going, and then when they came up to sort of the room that I'm working in and they see a bin full of sort of Freddy wrappers, then ultimately I've been rumbled. But it's hard work, and you've got to keep your energy up, so I've sort of managed to defend myself on that one.
So you were one of the stockpilers then, right?
We weren't stockpilers. I mean, we should have been. Given I didn't know how my eating would kick in, so I probably should have been, but we weren't. And the kids have suffered, unfortunately, for that. But
there's probably a metaphor in there with football somewhere, but I'll leave that now. But okay, so cool. Thanks, guys. Just coming back to this kind of broad theme around how kind of sports got this opportunity to kind of tear it down and rebuild it. It'd be interesting to kind of dig into the extent to which you think that might happen in sport and obviously football. Because obviously, if we take the opposite view, I also read a piece by Matt Dickinson in the Times who was suggesting that football would perhaps just kind of go back to doing things after a period of time the way they've always been done. So we've kind of got that broad theme which we can have as a kind of backdrop. But then there was also this piece in The Economist which I read. Been doing a lot of reading, obviously, with this downtime period, and they were basically suggesting that the crisis was accelerating 3 global trends. And the first one was kind of weak business models and stretched balance sheets. And the piece kind of said, I'm reading it here, that downturns are capitalism's ultimate sorting mechanism, which got me thinking. And the second trend was kind of polarization within industries. And they spoke about kind of the top dogs' resilience, allowing them to win market share over smaller rivals. And they use the example of kind of Amazon, how obviously everyone's shopping online at the moment. I mean, that trend was happening anyway. But, there's companies like Amazon who are actually like ramping up their recruitment at the moment and hiring loads of people to actually, because they've obviously become more required at this stage. That was the second thing. And then the third thing was kind of businesses are having to work in new ways. And, some very obvious examples there around kind of the fast adoption of new technologies, such as this kind of video conference that we're having on Zoom today, which we probably wouldn't have been having otherwise. And so I started thinking about those 3 things within the context of kind of football, and clearly there are some parallels. And so if you take that first one, kind of weak business models and stretched balance sheets, I'll maybe come to you first, Simon, just to reshuffle the order. And there was I read a piece in the BBC, and it was entitled, clubs at every level are at risk. And so I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts from the perspective of Stockport County. You already touched on a little bit where the club was in its journey. I mean, obviously we've just had a recent ownership change. The club I think was gone through ownership change in maybe January, as recently as January. So just kind of give me a sense of what your view is on that kind of, the stretched balance sheets and the financial picture from your perspective.
Yeah, I think that it's been really well discussed at this moment in time that the unsustainable nature of this business and the risk that it carries, and where the main revenue streams are for clubs at different levels, and outside the top, even outside the Premier League, I think that the broadcast deals are not as strong, and a big proportion of people's revenue comes from gate receipts and the secondary spend with regard to that. So obviously in this moment in time, with all of that turned off, but with contracts to carry on paying staff and players, it just puts the club at an unsustainable position, which relies on the benefactor. And I think this is just, that's that saying of like, when the tide comes out, you sort of see who's swimming naked, or whoever came up with that quote. You sort of just see exactly to the level which clubs are operating in that way. Everyone knows there's a bit of a normalness known that there is a requirement for outside investment, because most people are outspending their turnover or pushing it very, very hard. You don't know to what degree that how extreme that is, and this situation is gonna bring that to life. So I think that's we talk about constraints leading creativity. Sometimes, often in many times, it's survival, isn't it? It's a case of how the hell are we going to survive this? What can we do? How would we do it? And then off the back of that, realizing that actually that model that we've come up with is better than the one we had before. I remember that really well in the City experience, when we suddenly went from one club to multiple clubs, and we were acquiring clubs really, really quickly, but not thinking about the lead time of acquiring players and going into transfer windows and so forth. So we had to sort of suddenly support 3 or 4 clubs with the same group of scouts and the same resources that we had before, and come up with a way of doing it. And then we actually realised that, well, actually, the way that we were working before, that was stupid. I can't believe we were working that way, and we changed the way we were working. So sometimes, pushing yourself into an extreme situation, it forces you to think about another way of doing it. And I don't know what the answer is going to be for the wider game, but there's a lot of solutions that have been put out there, whether that's more part-time contracts, or whether it's AstroTurf pitches, or whether it's regional leagues, or whatever it is. And some of these will be great way forward for clubs. So I think there's no doubt about it that this is going to have a real effect, not a 5-minute effect. This will have a real effect. People will change their mindset about stuff. And I think right now, I think that the next club that pays 75 million or 100 million for a transfer fee, I think that a lot of the population will start to think that's unethical to do that. So I think that it will become less trendy to do things that the way we were behaving in the way before. I think that you're seeing that now with the fact of all of this ability to do video calls and all the rest of the stuff. I think that the next person to go on a plane for a 1-hour meeting, people will start to think, well, why are you doing that? So I can for sure see, behaviour change and attitude change off the back of this.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, mate. And Rasmus, I read a piece by Henry Winter in the Times that said clubs will need to get smarter in the transfer market when football returns, like Brentford. And the piece went on to say clubs will have to operate more shrewdly, like Brentford, widely held up as the model of buying, improving and selling. And I know you've already mentioned it today, and you've kind of written a lot previously around how constraints can lead, kind of breed innovation. So I'm just kind of curious to think of, understand more specifically kind of what you're doing at Midtjylland and Brentford, and what conversations you're having around how can we come out of this, with a positive mindset and come out of this even stronger.
Yeah, well, we have. I think that's probably what he refers to. That our business model at Brentford has been to, like many other clubs, we run with an operational loss, and there's basically only 2 ways you can you can close that gap every year, and that is to go to the Premier League or to sell players with a profit. And since we haven't been able to go to the Premier League yet, then we have been forced to make a profit on our transfers to make the business tick. Now there are some question marks about what effect is this going to have on the transfer window, and obviously that could affect us as well. So I think there's just at the moment there is just too much uncertainty around everything, so that you are able to say like this is going to be the business model of the future, or that is going to be the model of the future. I think what we've seen is that, especially the broadcasting deals, they have a massive impact on everything else, and much of the money goes into the transfer market. They come from the broadcasting deals in the 5 big leagues, and we've kind of taken that in football maybe for granted. And now we are facing a situation where maybe some leagues are not able to finish the season. That will affect the broadcasting deals. That would affect everything. So I think this is kind of an opportunity where you have to try and look at other types of business models, not over relying on broadcasting revenue, but are there other ways you as a football club can build a business? Can you play a bigger role within your community? One thing we talk a lot about at Midtjylland, at least, is that there's a globalization happening in football as well, and a polarization as well. So the big clubs are going global and getting global fan bases, but that's not the recipe for everyone. I think for us, we don't have a global brand. We need to go the other way. We need to go a lot more local and a lot more regional. Ask ourselves, how can we create a lot more value for our sponsors here and our partners within our region? So I think every club will need to look at their individual situation and say, what's the assets that we have? Where can we be unique? And then try and capitalize as well as they can on that. And that's why I think, the TV broadcasting deals we've seen, and the size of those deals we've seen over the past 5 years, maybe that have made the football ecosystem a little bit complacent, because those are 5-10 year contracts, and we were just taking them for granted and say, well, football is an isolated system when the rest of the society, you saw that with the financial crisis back in 7, 8, and 9, football was actually having growth rates in those times because of those broadcasting deals. So, but maybe we are not as closed system as we thought we were, and I think that can give that can trigger some interesting conversations about new types of business models for football clubs.
Yeah, nice. I like it. And that's maybe a good segue for you, Eddie. We spoke, didn't we, in the last 24 hours about effect on the kind of women's game, and how it just give us a bit of a sense of how you're feeling about it, because it felt like the women's football was just on such a wave and really trending upwards. Are you kind of worried, or are you staying positive? Like how are you seeing it?
I think for the first time, we're seeing a lot of the decisions made on the men's side, so the professional sport for men, are actually impacting the women. So we're all sort of being put in the same bracket, if you like. So decisions from the Premier League and the FA are also the decisions that affect us, which is something that we've wanted for a long time as a women's game. But actually, individually in this crisis, we're probably in a better position to deal with the likelihood of playing behind closed doors, for example, because we just don't have, we're not there yet in terms of our attendances. As exciting as it has been over the last few years, obviously seeing sort of record-breaking broadcasting ratings go through the roof with the World Cup and European Championships, it hasn't necessarily translated to weekly attendance. So actually, where most clubs get on average 1,500 a game, actually playing behind closed doors doesn't necessarily affect our revenue stream or our business model as much as it would in the men's game. So we're in a position, I think, to adapt probably a bit better than the men's game in terms of this sort of unprecedented crisis. And as I said, I think women's football's in a place where it has to be creative in terms of our revenue streams, because it is going to take a while for the likes of 20,000 fans to be coming week in, week out. So we have to look at sponsorship models. We have to look at sponsored content. We have to look at sort of, brand deals, education partners. There's so many different revenue streams that we can pull money from that depart from the traditional model of, you know, BT Sport or Sky give us X amount of money and we distribute that. So in a way, it's kind of, you know, for me as a sporting director, it's quite exciting, because the conversations have to be creative anyway around women's football. It's almost like working in a startup women's football. It's kind of, there's lots of different opportunities to navigate. Where the men's game has hit a bit of a ceiling, the women's game is still growing, it's still finding its legs. So I think from a women's football perspective, that's quite positive. Our ability to adapt. For example, finishing off this season, you know, from a Villa perspective, we're probably in a better position to say, well, actually, there's not going to be a lot of concern around even if we are playing behind closed doors, fans still turn up outside the stadium. We're probably not going to have that problem, because we're still not attracting that level of fans. But I think from the men's, you know, just on Rasmus's point about, you know, the business model on the men's side, I do think there's been an over-reliance on, obviously, broadcasting revenue. I see, you know, rather than polarization, I see a real opportunity for collaboration from, you know, the big clubs on a regional basis. So, for example, a Liverpool should be talking to a Tranmere, should be talking to an Everton about financially, say, well, where are you struggling? Can we help? Rather than it be sort of, you know, closed in, we have a problem as a club, this is how we're going to sort it. Can that sort of the top-down approach be implemented so the game as a football family comes together a bit more? I think this is a real opportunity where everyone's having financial issues to help each other out from a club perspective. Because I think the football family tag gets sort of thrown about conveniently, but this is really a time to actually see it. And then just on the fan engagement side, I think it's a real opportunity for fan engagement. You know, we saw with Liverpool and Spurs just absolute PR disasters in terms of, you know, they just completely misread how it was going to affect the fans in terms of the furlough stuff. You know, the club put in non-playing staff on furlough. So I think moving forward, the new norm being engaging fans more in sort of business making decisions at clubs. Have a focus group of fans that you sit down and say, look, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do, what do you think? It doesn't mean you've got to make a decision that the fans want, it just means you're more informed when you're coming to a decision. I think clubs, particularly at the top level, maybe don't care about fans as much as they let on when it comes to that, the business side of it. And I think, you know, we've seen that some clubs have been caught out with that. So I certainly would like to see a bit more fan engagement on the business side of things.
Couple of themes there where we're kind of starting to bleed into this second trend around kind of polarization within industries, and the example that I read and kind of triggered my thinking was like in much the same way as Amazon is kind of seemingly going from strength to strength, you know, while the kind of poor local shop around the corner is being forced to kind of pull its shutters down and furlough its staff until further notice. And in a football context, you kind of worry, you know, you can't help but feel that some of the top clubs or the top leagues, you know, might kind of continue to pull away from the smaller clubs. So we touched on it a little bit already, but I wouldn't mind just digging into that a bit more. And Raz, you spoke a bit more about kind of how Midtjylland might be approaching that in terms of this kind of global versus local kind of strategy. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
No, I think it's something, as you mentioned yourself, like it happens in every industry, globalization, and that means that you know, there's a little bit of a winner takes it all aspect to that. You know, some of the big brands get really big, get really dominating on a global scale. I think you'll see that with some of the big clubs in football, which is also a concern to many in terms of the reforms that, you know, are currently ongoing, the reforms of the European competition system. And I mean, the way I think about it is that it's not something you can stop. I think globalization is not a wave you can stop, but it doesn't mean that every company or every club needs to follow that same recipe to become a global brand. And for many clubs, the the way forward might be to go the complete opposite direction, to go more local, to go more regional. So I think, for example, from a Midtjylland point of view, that the growth, the commercial growth for this club is not going to come from getting global sponsors in, or even maybe national sponsors in, but more, growing more with the sponsors we already have, with the partners we have. So one of the concepts we discuss quite a lot is this share wallet concept, that what you are, if you for example run a gas station, and one customer goes to you to get fueled, 3 times a month, and this person fuel his car like 4 times a month, then you would have a 75% share of his wallet. And we talked about that in relation to sponsorship, that rather than talking about sponsors, then maybe talk about how can we add value. What's our share wallet, not of a sponsorship budget, but of a for example, a talent development budget, an educational budget in a company, because we have a core competence in being a good talent developer. Is that something we can help our sponsorship base with? So they don't just buy exposure at the stadium or a sign with the name on, but we actually contribute to their business in other ways than just being that traditional role. And I think we have a lot more growth in that respect by increasing our share wallet with those customers than starting to think about how we can become a global brand. So I think you just got to take notice of what's happening in football and in any other industry, and then you have to ask yourself, what is your business model in that landscape? And for us here, and I think it might be slightly different for Brentford, but for us here at Midtjylland, I think we need to think about going against that trend and going a lot more local and a lot more regional.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. What about you, Si? I mean, either from a Stockport perspective or just from a global game perspective, like what's your sense on this notion of that the game might continue to become polarized?
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, ultimately, if you're a buyer right now, you are buying in the ultimate buyer's market. And so, I sort of think of, we talked about before with revenue streams and stuff like that. A country like, I don't know, Croatia, who produce really, really good footballers year in, year out, but the broadcast deal is not likely to be strong there. We'll have huge attendance on a match-by-match basis in some of the big clubs, but ultimately can't do that right now. Are gonna need revenue, right? And if clubs have got the ability to go and sign players, they're the sort of prime places where you're going to be able to go and find really, really good talent at not market prices. And even in a local level here in England, with Brexit on the horizon and hasn't yet come through exactly what the criteria is going to be, but there's going to be an effect, and the value of British players is going to go up. So if you're a big British club with big English club in the Premier League with money, what a moment in time to go and get the best British talent. So there's, of course, those opportunities are out there. I really do relate to Eni's point there, and I think that you're seeing this right across society anyway, with more the role of government, if you like, or governance, if you like, it takes on a huge role at this moment in time, because they've got to look for the benefit to all, and they've got to ensure that we do have a competition on the other side of this. And no one's saying it has to be exactly the same as what we've had before. Why not evolve it and make it better? But we should have a competition. Competition needs a number of people, and I think that might be where a lot of the innovation starts to happen at the governance level, whereby they're able to look at sort of big macro policies that can increase the sustainability for more people. And we might reduce some of the zeros on some of the contracts. But we can still have a really vibrant, competitive, innovative game across male, female, different territories, different categories. So in that case, it might not be a polarization. It might be a bit more of a coming together. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's very much on my mind here with thinking about, taking ourselves out of it at the moment, but sort of thinking about what does football at this level look like? What's going to be the landscape and what's going to be the impact in the next 3 to 5 years? Is that I would expect to see more league involvement and league taking a little bit more leadership and ownership over what does the product look like? How does it operate? How can we work on this as a collective rather than as singular clubs? And it'd be interesting because I don't think the leagues are set up for that really. I think having done a bit of time working with the Premier League, I feel it's a very challenging role working in a league office when you've got to sort of sit in the middle of in the Premier League, 20 clubs competing agendas all on slightly different scales and try and find the commonality to it. It's very hard to do. You've got some powerful voices in the room. But I think this is the moment in time where they will need to step up and do that. And, hopefully they are able to do that. And clubs recognise that they're acting in the interest for the wider game,
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to third and final trend. So this kind of notion that businesses are kind of having to work in new ways. And obviously football is no different. We wouldn't be having this Zoom call now. And we're seeing obviously the acceleration of data-driven scouting because obviously scouts aren't able to attend games, etc. And there was a quote from Monchi, the sporting director of Sevilla, which I read and kind of made me smile. And apparently he said, the only difference is that meetings take place on video calls, so you don't have to wear a suit. I'm pretty sure I've never seen Rasmus wear a suit anyway, so I don't think there's going to be much change there. But I was just quite curious, will these kind of the way we're having to work now, is that going to, in your guys' mind, kind of force any new behaviours in the future? And maybe I'll come to you on that one first, Eni, if that's okay.
I think where a lot of clubs are sort of mirror companies in a way, where there's sort of that 9 to 5 culture of clock watching and everyone's seeing who's in today and who's not. I think that all goes away. I think now it is about efficiency. It's about people being able to work from wherever they are in the world and still get things done. And I really like that because I think it allows for just more sort of new cultures to come in. I think it's quite old fashioned, that sort of, clock off at 5 o'clock, you're looking at your watch. And I think clubs ultimately don't operate like that anyway. You're working on the weekends, you're sort of everyone's geared towards winning on the weekend sort of thing. And, it allows for sort of just people to work from different lifestyle. I think it's amiable to women, particularly women who have children, etc. You're working, you don't have to be in, you don't have to be traveling into the stadium where you work, etc. So there's positives from that, I think, because I think there was still a bit few archaic sort of cultures within football clubs. I also think that ultimately there's lots of opportunities for clubs to be able to create content digitally that has the same impact physically. So, for example, that's that show Gogglebox where you're effectively watching people watch TV. I think that would be a great idea, where there may be sort of restrictions on attendance. And, back to the globalization idea, watching somebody in Indonesia watch Liverpool could be great TV, could be great content. And it localizes what is usually quite globalized. So just clubs being creative around this sort of digital tech revolution, really, that's, that we're relying on at the moment through operations in sport. I think that's where clubs can just be a lot more creative, can push the needle a lot more, rather than sort of leaning back on these traditional broadcasting models. I think there was a lot of talk before the coronavirus kicked in around sort of this Premflix idea, where you sort of get, you know, all the content at once. You know, I worked for Amazon during in December, and you know, I think the Premier League were very scared, Sky in particular, because Amazon came in, pay $7.99, you get all the content at once, you get all live games at once. I think that's the way that, you know, the game really could go. And I know women's football, the FA have got this new FA player where, again, you can watch live games all at the same time. So I think the digital opportunity is really big there for sport to, again, just create a new norm. It's not changing the wheel, but it's just adding new norms. I know gaming's really kicking off at the moment in terms of clubs that do have, you know, e-sport teams are obviously doing really well because, you know, they operate in a digital space. So again, it's just being really creative and savvy around the technology tools that we have.
Yeah. And I think, like you alluded to, a lot of these things were happening anyway, right? But it's maybe just like the acceleration because people become forced to do it, and there's a huge vacuum in what's normal in people's lives, and so people look towards, you know, like you said, new content and new stimulus. Really, what do you think, Raz?
Yeah, I think that this crisis is gonna accelerate digitization in most industries, and football probably no exception. I agree with all what Eni described about like a digital solution for fans and for sponsors. One interesting question I think is how is it going to affect, you know, for example, parts of the traditional football operation, say recruitment. You know, a lot of clubs have traditionally relied on as a network of scouts traveling around the world, watching games live, quite a labor extensive model. That's not possible to do now because there are travel restrictions. There will probably be travel restrictions for quite a while. So is this going to lead to clubs looking to restructure their recruitment departments, for example, becoming more data driven, relying more on video scouting, you know, and in a way maybe that turns out to be a more effective model than the traditional one. So I think that you can find plenty of examples of things that have been already starting in football, like more the digitization, which will probably accelerate after this.
Yeah. Si?
Everything everyone else said, I echo. I just as the only thing I maybe offering the yang a little bit to the yin. I definitely see the increase of digitalisation. I think that was happening anyway. As Rasmus said, the word accelerator I think is completely true. But I do think what else you're noticing is that the opposite in people really valuing real experiences, offline experiences. So, you know, I think that a lot of people have enjoyed the recent good weather and, you know, being outside and being in nature in some way, and the slowing down element of life a little bit and the resetting. There's a lot of hurdles to go over regarding getting crowds of people again together. But imagine the first crowd that come together and how special that'll feel, and the noise and the smells and all the things that we did. So I think people are really missing that right now because it's what you can't get, and I think it almost increases the value of it. Yeah, I think what else is like everyone's got a story of, I don't know, the grandpa learning Zoom for the first time, like awkwardly and painfully, but like learning it, or the kids coming into the meeting, the Zoom call, and you're having to have a little bit of 2 minutes of talking your kid to go away, and the kid making everyone on the call laugh. So I think people just got a reset and a appreciation of real sort of human life in a way. Do you know what I mean? And that there's value to that. And I don't know whether we'll start to see, you know, people less biases and less assumptions around older workers, or whether people, as you said at Eni, people will be more flexible working hours or practices and so forth, because they know that you can just get the job done. You commit, and it's just not in the same way. So I think there could be some really nice benefits that come off the back of it. A bit of a plug for Stockport and going on the sales pitch, but I really do see that small community club being very important at this moment in time, a way to bring and give hope and centralise messages and things to communities, because it's going to be hard times for everybody in the next chapter, and everyone needs a release, and everyone needs to feel proud about something and who they are. So I think that as much as there's a lot of very dangerous, what's the right word of saying, volatile period for small clubs, I think that it's something that we really should savour, and there is a huge role for them in the next chapter as well.
Just on that, Blake, I think, I don't know whether clubs have sort of maybe taken for granted the gate receipts and the sort of, the impact of fans not being able to come to games. And I would hope that, once football does come back, there is some sort of discounts or incentives for fans to sort of reward them for what they've missed. Because I think clubs are realising, bloody hell, there's a lot of, it's really important revenue stream is attendance. I think there's a lot of focus on the broadcasting deal and sponsorship and shirt deal, and that's all important. But actually, fundamentally, when it comes down to it, people just want to watch their football team on a Saturday or a Sunday, and that sense of community. And I think where we've seen football become more globalised, it's priced people out of being able to buy tickets. And people ultimately can't follow the tradition that they've done over the years through their family supporting their club. So I'd like to think that through this period, clubs have realised how important it is that sort of standard revenue stream of fans coming to clubs, and can kind of flip it and sort of, for example, Villa haven't changed their prices of their tickets, even though we got promoted. So fans are still paying what they paid in the Championship in the Premier League, and that's such a little thing, but it's a huge benefit to fans. So, I would hope, and we've seen a lot of clubs do great things in the community during this period, raising money for the NHS, players doing it. Does it take a pandemic for that to happen? Can clubs continue doing that stuff proactively in the community and really just being that sort of benefactor for the community? I think that's where we just can take the positives out of this and continue it as just part of culture of football.
Yeah, here. Cool. Well, listen, guys, I think we'll start to wrap it up here, but I'm actually going to come back to you, Eni, and give you the last word, if that's okay, because a few days ago I caught you on Instagram talking about the need, yes, not only to stay connected to kind of family and friends and colleagues during this period, as we discussed, there's a lot of kind of onus on staying connected with family, etc. But you said something which I thought was really cool and quite profound, actually. And you talked about the importance of connecting with yourself during this period. So I just thought maybe we could end on that, because I'll let you kind of elaborate, really.
Well, I don't know whether it's because I'm a bit of a weirdo and just kind of really like my own company, but I found this period quite demanding. In terms of constantly connecting. We've got 10 Zoom calls, you've got this house party app that you've got 8 people on one call, and actually I think where we've been starved of sort of normal human connection, I think people are trying to fill that void with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these different connections. But ultimately it's a good time to just spend time with yourself, just upskill yourself, learn something new. I just signed up to a piano app to learn the piano, and you can read more, cook more, do more fitness. I think fitness is definitely something that will improve coming out of this. Lots of people doing more fitness than they've ever done before. Lots of people running on the street that they've never run on before. Just your own self personal well-being, rather than feeling like, oh my God, I've not seen my family, I've not seen my friends, I've got to get on a call with them. And then you sit on a call and it's sort of awkward because you don't really have anything to talk about. Oh, I've sat on the sofa too, and oh yeah, I've sat on the sofa too. It's just so I think it's really important, just that time to spend for yourself, and ultimately it makes you a better person, it grows you as a person. To just listen to yourself a bit more during this period.
Yeah, no, I love that. No one's going to look back on this in 12 months' time and go, "Oh, I'm really glad that I watched all of Netflix." Right? They're going to, yeah,
exactly.
Nice. Cool. Well, listen, I think that's a really cool way to finish the discussion. Before I go, my marketing guy would kill me if could everyone just like wave, because I've got to take a screenshot here that we might use for cool. All right, nice. But listen, thanks so much for taking the time, guys. I know we've maybe got a bit more time on our hands these days, but your time's still precious. You're all still working, and so really appreciate it. And I hope folks listening into this sometime next week will enjoy the conversation as well. But take care of yourselves, and I'll catch up with you soon.